Sihang, do you want me to just kick it off, or do you want to say something?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this. My name is Emily Rupel, and I'm a last year PhD student from Carnegie Mellon. And I'm here today on behalf of my co-chair, Sihang Liu, and a big committee of folks from CASA to tell you about a new program in long-term mentoring for computer architecture that we're proposing. Before I go any further, I'm going to ask everybody to mute, including you, Sihang. I can still, so that we can, keep on going. All right. So first of all, why are we interested in long-term mentoring? Well, prior research in mentoring, specifically in academic mentoring, has indicated that it improves retention in research. So what I mean by that is that if students receive mentoring during their graduate years, they're more likely to stay in research afterwards, which means they're more likely to stay as part of the community stays healthy. The problem, though, is that further research showed that the benefits of mentoring don't appear instantaneously. It takes time for mentors and mentees to develop relationships that really allow the mentee to get the full benefit. So this doesn't happen overnight. However, and this is jumping to the punchline a little bit, we've already had initiatives within the computer architecture community looking at whether or not folks are interested in long-term mentoring, specifically in our community. Specifically, the Meet a Senior Student and Meet a Senior Architect participants from Micro and AskPLOS in the last year were asked if they were interested in long-term mentoring as well, interested in participating as mentors or mentees, and over 80% were interested. So at this point, we've seen the research and we have the data to know that not only is this a good idea for our community, but there's interest. So the question then is, if we look across the spectrum of mentoring programs that already exist in the computer architecture community, is there anything that meets these needs already? So the needs we're talking about when it comes to long-term mentoring is there a program that targets just all students across the board? Is there one that's long-term? And is it targeted at computer architects? Because what I have listed here are several mentoring programs that you may have heard of. The first couple, shown in orange, are programs that happen at computer architecture conferences. The first one here, CWWMCA, is targeted at women and underrepresented groups within computer architecture and supports them through mentoring. There's YARC and MUARC, which are targeted at younger members of our community. And then there's Meet a Senior Student and Meet a Senior Architect, which are networking and mentoring opportunities that happen at conferences. The final program I have highlighted in blue here is actually borrowed from the programming languages community. This is a long-term mentoring program that we've drawn a lot of inspiration from. So let's see which of these meet which requirements. So we look at the first step, and there's only a couple of these that actually target all students across, kind of all characteristics. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Next, which of these is long-term? Well, none of the ones within the computer architecture community are actually long-term. But if we look at our final criteria, SIGPlan-M is really targeted at the programming languages community. And that's fantastic, but we don't want to just hop in there because it's not the computer architecture community. So for that reason, we're proposing the Computer Architecture Long-Term Mentoring Program, or CALM. And CALM is the acronym that I'll be using throughout the rest of this talk. So this is how the rest of the talk is going to proceed. I just gave you a little bit of a description on why we're interested in long-term mentoring in the first place. From there, I'll give some description of CALM. I'll start with an overview of how this program works, and then we'll jump into the goals of the program. And finally, I'll talk you through the implementation to try to convince you that we can actually pull this off. So let's talk about what CALM is and what it's going to look like. So first of all, the main idea is that CALM is going to make one-year matches between mentors and mentees, and it'll do that in a series of phases. The first is the recruitment phase, where we recruit mentors and mentees. And that's right now. You all are participating in this, so thank you so much. Once we've asked people to join, we ask them to fill out a a single Google form to give us enough information to match them up. So I've shown here are two different matching sets, if you will. One that focuses on technical attributes and one that focuses on personal attributes, personal like compatibility between mentors and mentees. The first set focuses on technical interests because we're interested in having two different tracks within CALM. And I'll explain more about those later, but the idea with the technical side is that the pairs will be focused on technical topics, so we'll match them based on their technical interests. On the flip side, we have the personal development and professional development track will basically go with attributes in order to give folks someone who's more similar to them in those personality aspects. So once mentors and mentees are matched up, they're going to be responsible for figuring out when to meet on approximately a monthly basis to get help with what they're planning to accomplish. And they'll meet on a monthly basis over the course of a year. However, after a year, the mentors and mentees will have the opportunity to rematch. This is an idea that we're borrowing directly from SIGPlan. The idea being that mentees can then benefit from multiple mentors over the course of their participation in the program. Mentors get the opportunity to take more or fewer mentees depending on their availability. And it gives them an opportunity to meet more people as well. So that's the rough idea of CALM. It's 1 year matches. Now, to drill in a little bit more into what the timeline for this is going to look like, we're starting right now in October 2021 with recruiting mentors and mentees. Again, thank you for taking part in this recruitment phase. Our hope is that by January, we're going to be able to start a small scale pilot program with absolutely no more than 30 pairs, maybe much smaller. The idea of this is that we'll ask the folks in this pilot program to provide feedback on how the program is going. That way we can make sure that we're ready to scale out this program, that we've got all the bugs worked out. The idea being that by approximately ISCA next year, we can really start to scale out and pair more mentors and mentees. So that's the timeline that we're looking at. Now, I've given you that overview of how CALM works and an overview of our timeline. So let's talk a little bit more about the goals of this program. First of all, CALM is looking to put together matches that are going to have definite outcomes, perhaps not tangible outcomes, but we want folks to have like a focus going into it. So we've divided up the participants into 2 tracks. We're asking them to pick one when they enter, mentees specifically. And those are the research track and the development track. That research track is the one that's where people are paired based on technical interests. The idea here being that the focus will be on technical projects. So what this might look like would be something like a literature review. So say on every meeting, the mentee would come with a new paper they read and describe it to the mentor and discuss that topic. Or it might look something like chatting with an industry mentor on a technical topic of what that looks like from the implementation side. Or even something like a wacky paper. We're just suggesting that folks focus on a technical topic in order to work towards a goal there. On the development track, the personal and professional development track, this will look a little different and it may be harder to put a finger on exactly what the outcome is. But the idea is that you would focus on one thing in particular. So let's say I'm having a mentor during my job search. I would work with them to get feedback on places I'm looking or on my job materials, things like that. But you could also do something else, say practicing communication skills or working on a personal problem that you're dealing with in your life, such as if you're having trouble with like your relationship with your advisor, you chat with your mentor about how things are going and set a goal of improving that throughout the course of the year. So that's the rough idea here. Now, if we zoom out 1,000 feet, another goal of this program is that we want it to work for everyone. The goal here is that this program is inclusive. And when I say inclusive, I mean people from backgrounds, characteristics, universities, industry and academia, technical topics. We want to make sure we've built something that's approachable for the entire community. Additionally, we want it to be sustainable. We don't want mentors to get burnt out from mentoring 1 billion mentees. We also want mentees to continue to sign up because they feel like they're getting something out of it. Which brings me to the final point that we want it to be useful. We want folks to be getting something out of it and we want them to be putting something in. So how are we going to do this? Surveys. So that's a heads up, is that if you are entering into this program, and I hope you all do, be prepared for surveys. We're trying to take a data-driven approach here so that we know where we need to improve. So I've talked a little bit about the goals of CALM, so let me pull back the curtain on the implementation a little bit. So one thing to keep in mind is that at the moment, mentor-mentee matching is a pretty manual process. We take information from the Google Forms and hand it off to our team. And while this team is made up of superheroes, they are just humans. So do keep that in mind. For instance, thank you so much to all of the people who have already filled out these forms, but it's going to take us a little while to match people up. So just keep that in mind as you're entering or like signing up with the program. Additionally, I want to just explain the rough organization of CALM at the moment. It's divided into two committees, a logistics and advisory committee that we're building. So the logistics committee is primarily composed of students. These folks carry out the day-to-day of CALM, which means handling communication with the mentors and mentees, organizing events like these, and making sure the website's up to date. And this is a bit of a shameless plug, asking for help if you are a student who's interested. Our goal here is to make it about a 1 to 2 hour per week obligation. So if you're interested in that kind of work where you're going to communicate with hopefully a big swath of the computer architecture community, please send us an email and we'll get you linked in. Now, the advisory committee, we are still building, but the idea here is that we're looking for more senior community members who can kind of provide that sage matching advice to help us say, when we say, okay, we've got a mentee who needs X, Y, and Z with this technical interest. We'll send an email to you saying, which of these two mentors should we pick? And you, potentially knowing these mentors better than we do, can give us some advice. So our hope here is to really drill this down to kind of a minimal commitment of asking you to answer emails a couple times a month. Additionally, we'd probably be pinging you to give us a hand scheduling conference events. So if you are interested in being part of the advisory committee or know someone who would be a good fit, we're accepting nominations now. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your attention. I've got the mentors and mentee sign-up forms listed here, but all of this information is available on comparcmentoring.org. So please head over there if you're interested in joining the program. Thanks. So with that, I will hand it off to Sihang and we can move on to the panel.
Thanks so much, Emily, for the talk. And let's get started with the panel session. So my name is Sihang Liu. I'm a PhD student at the University of Virginia, and I'm happy to be the moderator of this panel session. Today's panel, we are bringing together 5 researchers from both industry and academia. They have organized and supported different types of programs that target junior researchers. And now I will introduce each panelist. Alex Douglas is assistant professor of the computer science at Georgia Tech. His research lies in the intersection between computer architecture and systems, with a focus on data centers, rack-scale architectures, and network compute co-designs. He co-organized the Rising Stars in the Computer Architecture Workshop in 2019 and the Young Architecture Workshop in 2020 and 2021. Lena Olsen is a software engineer at Google, where she works at Snap, a user-space network stack. She has been involved in a mentorship program since grad school. And at Google, she continues mentoring interns and junior teammates. She is a co-founder of the undergraduate mentoring workshop, ARCH, at ISCA 2019, and co-organizes this program in 2020 and 21. Mohammad Shabazz is an assistant professor from Purdue University. His research focuses on domain-specific abstractions, compilers, and architectures for emerging workloads, such as machine learning and self-driving networks. He has mentored several grad students, both within the US and overseas, including Stanford, LUMS, and NUST. When he was a postdoc, he also mentored undergrads under Stanford's CURIS research program. Akshita Suraman is a visiting researcher at Google right now in the systems research group, and she'll start as an assistant professor in the ECE department at Carnegie Mellon University in January 2022. Her research bridges together computer architecture and software systems for better efficiency and performance. Over the past few years, she has been involved in a variety of mentorship activities, such as Women in Computer Architecture Mentorship Program, YARCH Workshop, and the Jobs Workshop. Stephen Swanson is a professor in the Department of Computer Science at UC San Diego. His research interest includes the systems, architecture, security, and reliability issues surrounding heterogeneous memory and storage systems. He is a co-founder of the Non-Volatile Memory Workshop, and he's also the creator of mycsphd.org, a website devoted to providing good information about getting PhD in computer science. Okay, thank you all for joining the panel, and let's start with questions. So the first question, can you please briefly share your past mentoring experience as both a mentor and mentee in a few sentences, please? So who'd like to get started first? I see Shabazz on my screen, in the first position on my screen. So can you get started?
Yeah, okay. So I think I can share some experience both as a mentor and a mentee because I recently started as a professor at Purdue. So I think the main thing is like most of the people who are coming in from the outside, like so outside the US, like especially from third world countries in Asia and stuff, they know how to do, like how to build things. They are trained to sort of engineer stuff and like code things and like develop things. But the bigger picture, like how to articulate the bigger picture and how to synthesize like an idea and then take it from ground up all the way to fruition is something that is lacking in there. It's not that they don't know that, it's just that they haven't gotten the experience of doing that during the undergrad and other experiences. So that is one thing that when I was coming into the US, I found a little struggle in like catching up to that. And luckily I have good mentors who understood this thing, and then they work closely with me to sort of help me like sort of train myself into not just getting bogged down with the technical details, but also like zoom out and see what is the bigger picture and how you want to express it and what is it solving as a whole. Because sometimes like even in research, you will see it's most of the time it's the motivation more so than the actual technical artifact that you built. So that was like sort of, I struggled again and again over my 5 years, but eventually I think I got to a position that I know the nuts and bolts of it because I started from zero and like learned the whole process through my 5 years of experience. And then the nice thing was, initially I thought that this was something that was lacking in me and I was not good in the first place or something like that. But suddenly when I shift my roles, like instead of being a mentee and now becoming a mentor, I found that it is a universal thing. It's not just me. Even folks at Stanford who are working with me were asking the same question, were facing the same problem. So that was sort of like a reinforcement for my thing. And because I had gone through this thing, I was like cognizant of this whole sort of thing about like developing this sort of trait in myself. I was able to then pinpoint and help them, like my postdoc advisees, into how to take care of that thing. Like it's a learning process. Everything, like if you don't know something, it doesn't mean that you are bad in that thing. It's just that you need to sort of spend more time and approach that thing in a very sort of specific way, because there are ways of learning things, like, and you cannot just randomly bang your hand on something and say, oh, I'm not getting it. There are ways to approach those aspects. So I'll stop here and like I'll let other people jump in.
So thanks so much for sharing experience. So I see Lena on the second place on my screen. Can you take it over and share some experience?
Sure. So I got a lot of mentoring when I was a grad student. And a lot of the things I struggled with were things, that a lot of people did. I'm having trouble communicating with my advisor, or I'm frustrated because my research isn't going as well as I think it should. And being able to just bounce ideas off of someone who wasn't my advisor, as well as hearing that these are common problems, were both really useful to me. And I think as I moved through grad school, I started mentoring junior students, and now in industry, I both have mentors and mentees, but a lot of it's the same sort of thing. Some of it's technical, but a lot of it is just knowing that other people have run into the same sorts of issues, and it's nothing wrong with any of us as people. It's not that we're not smart. It's that a lot of things in computer science are pretty hard, and everybody runs into problems with them.
Okay. Thanks for sharing experience. So I see Akshita next on my screen. Can you continue?
So I think like the biggest thing that I got a lot of mentorship on, of course, there's a lot of like research aspects, but I think the thing that my mentors really helped me overcome, or at least try to overcome, is like imposter syndrome, which I went through a lot during grad school. Perhaps I still have some imposter syndrome. Does anybody ever get over imposter syndrome? Really, I don't know. But anyway, so I think the point was having mentors who help me overcome that, and having people who are always continuously telling you that, oh, you know, you can do this and you are good enough. That gave me like a reassuring sense of, you know, maybe I can do this PhD, because of course there are several points in your PhD where you kind of get the sense that I don't think this is going to pan out, and perhaps I should drop out now before it's too late. So there were a lot of those instances. So having those people who sort of like help me recognize that, oh, this is something that I can do, I think was really meaningful during my PhD. As a mentor, I think I've done a little bit of the researchy aspects and also the non-researchy side of things. The non-researchy side of things was when we started this. It's a similar long-term mentorship program, but it was specifically tailored for women in computer architecture, the group. And so the for the researchy aspects, I think the biggest learning point there was that each student is very different. So you kind of want to be able to adapt to their needs. So it takes some time to, first of all, try and assess and understand what is it that the student even needs, and how are you going to go about adapting to their needs, which I think is super critical. For the non-researchy aspects, one of the biggest interesting I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it was really interesting to see that a lot of these problems that students would talk about, and these were students from different universities, right? Because they're all broadly a part of this WICAR group. It's very university specific, so it took some time to understand the procedures in that university that they're having struggle with, or the kinds of advisor relationship, which interestingly is, I think, a little bit different in each university. So of course I cannot go and change what's going on in their university. So I had to try and figure out how can I best support the student, even though I don't have access to the kinds of resources that would have been nice to have, because I'm not from that university. So yeah, so those are, I think, the two types of experiences.
Thanks so much, Akshita. So Alex, you are next on the screen. Can you continue?
Yes, thank you, Sihang, for the introduction, and thanks to CASA for organizing this. I think it's an amazing idea. Trying to not repeat what others said before me, I just want to mention how important I found in my academic career so far as a student and as junior faculty to have more than a single mentor, and to diversify the type of mentors you have. Also, especially for students, it's very important to draw the distinction between your PhD advisor or your research advisor and a mentor, right? Because the relationship you build with a mentor is a lot more, the person who is your mentor, you get into a relationship that is a lot more impartial and selfless, because ultimately, yes, a great advisor will be that as well, right? But you shouldn't forget that ultimately your advisor is working with you and is trying to get, is eager to get some promising results, right? So unlike that, a mentor doesn't really have, let's say, skin in the game, right? So they have the luxury of taking a step back, trying to see the big picture and help you find the root cause of the problems and advise you based on that. So if possible, try to get more than one mentor. Having too many mentors is also counterproductive, I would say, because it's very unlikely you will get similar advice from different people. Getting more than one opinion is helpful. Getting too many opinions is gets very confusing. I think that's more advice for junior faculty than students. Yeah, try to strike a sweet spot between diversity, polyphony, and getting clear goals. For instance, in my PhD, one of my mentors was Anastasia Ilamaki, who gave the keynote today. And you end up getting, with different mentors that you also have different paces of communications, right? There are some mentors that are your fail-safe, right? You go to them only if things are about to explode, you have built a relationship over time. You don't really talk to them that often, but they know you, you know them, you trust them. So you have specific safe places. Like a mentor is a safe place, right? And you value people as mentors for specific advice they can give you and specific points of view. So at this point, I have more experience as a mentee than a mentor. I have some experience as an organizer of mentoring events, which I guess we might get into this more later on. And I just want to point out that I've definitely benefited a lot by having good mentors, and I advise everyone to try to get a mentor. I commend CASA for setting up the structure for it, and I leave it at that. Thanks.
I'm muted. Thanks so much, Alex. So Steve, can you also share your experience on mentorship?
Sure. So I guess I've had lots of good mentors. Hopefully I've maybe been a good mentor from time to time also. I think the thing that I have found the most useful mentors that I've had, there's some that, they have, and some other folks have mentioned this, they have institutional knowledge, so they know how to like get stuff done in your department or something. And that's very nuts and bolts. And those kind of mentors, I think, are relatively easy to find. Lots of people are willing to tell you, you need to talk to so-and-so and fill out this form and whatever, and this is possible and that's not possible and so forth. But what I think is probably the most valuable kind of mentors, and they're harder to come by, and they take a little bit more work, are ones where you can really develop a good relationship with them. And I've been fortunate enough to have some of these kind of come about in my life. And what's really valuable about them is that you can ask them for advice, and I don't know how to say this. There's no strings attached, I guess. So for instance, when I became a faculty member, I was assigned a mentor, and he was a senior member of our department, and he's a very helpful and well-meaning person, and I'm still friends with him. But there was always a little bit of a problem. Like I couldn't really go to him with like the thorny problems, because eventually he's going to be voting on my tenure case, and he's sort of in the chain of command, so to speak. And so you really need mentors that are outside of that, whose, I guess, loyalty is to you more than to the department or to something else, so that they can really give you kind of unvarnished and direct advice. And you can feel safe that if you tell them your deepest, darkest concerns, and when stuff is not going well, that's not going to like pop up again later in a faculty meeting or something. I was like, yeah, well, he told me his research is a disaster. So those take time to develop. And so I think this idea of long-term mentorship is a really good one. And having a kind of a more intentional way of developing those kinds of relationships can be really valuable. So that's what I would say.
Thanks so much, Steve. So thank you all for sharing the experience. I guess the conclusion is long-term mentorship is very valuable. It will be helpful to get feedback from a diversity of people, and will help in career or personal development in many ways. So next, I'd like to ask more specific questions regarding organizing workshops that are already there that target junior researchers. So who would like to start with the organization experience?
So the thing is, I haven't done that before, so I'm more on the other side to listen to other people who have done this thing. Yeah.
So yeah, Alice, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can go. I'll just probably share a few unstructured thoughts here about, so just to give some quick context, I co-organized with Tushar Krishna the RISC A workshop in 2019, which is it is a workshop to help computer architects prepare for the academic job market. So it's final year focuses on final year PhD students. And then I co-organized YARC in 2020 and 2021. That this targets more early stage PhD students, and that forum is more about giving students the opportunity to submit like early stage ideas and get feedback in the form from a PC, and then also get paired up with senior architects in a more like a meet a senior architect event, but you basically get more opportunities for that. Now, first of all, I was very impressed that there were so many people in our community who would accept these invitations, right? When I started organizing these workshops, I wasn't sure that I would get like a big enough PC and pool of potential mentors to offer their free time, their limited free time that freely and that eagerly. So that was one big positive. I think these workshops are a great environment to basically, the way I view them is they offer students a low stakes environment to fail, right? It's much easier to fail in these environments, and that's how you learn, through failure. Because if you join these workshops and you do everything perfectly, you will not get any feedback, right? So you didn't really benefit from it. So ultimately, that's what I see these workshops as being the best offering of these workshops are this opportunity to fail without repercussions, right? In terms of mentoring, we call them mentoring workshops, but I wouldn't really consider them mentoring, exactly because in a mentoring relationship, your mentor needs to know you, and you as a mentee need to know your mentor and really feel comfortable with them, right? It's unlikely you meet someone for the first time for 30 minutes and you're really honest with them and they just get to know the very basics about you in these 30 minutes. So I would call them really not mentoring, but networking events, right? So the biggest benefits from these workshops is that next time you meet this person at the workshop, you don't have a cold start. You have done this in the past, so you get the chance to go talk to them. The other last benefit from the workshop, especially the YARC workshop, is that although it's very much structured like a review process, it's more, the key difference in the reviews are that they're more advice than criticism, right? So that part, actually the reviews themselves are more mentoring than the one-to-one events where you talk to someone for 30 minutes, because people actually will look at your work and they will give you an impartial opinion as to, based on their opinion, their opinion on how you should adapt your work to improve, right? So the workshops do offer an interesting mix of like lightweight mentoring and mostly networking, but I think to establish real mentoring, you need to do something like what you guys are setting up. You need to establish connections that are iterative.
Great. So does anyone else has any add-ons? Ashida, do you have any points? Because you're also involved in YARC workshop.
Yeah, so in terms of workshop organization, I think we organize jobs, and now I will be organizing the Young Architect workshop that Alex was talking about. And so like one of the things, I completely agree that a lot of people whom I was not even expecting would accept the invitation totally did. It was just like, oh, let me just try, what's the harm? And I was expecting like, declines, but everybody did accept. So that was pretty great. But I think Alex spoke a lot about like the positive side of things, but I do want to touch upon some of the please do not do type of situations, that like things that we learned. So I'm a part of the superhero network that Irene Zhang started. And one of the things that we started realizing as a part of this mentorship initiative is that there are some people in the community that students do not feel comfortable around. And so we need to be cognizant of that when we are setting up these mentor-mentee pairings. You want to set up a mentee with someone that the mentee feels comfortable with. And so you do want to consider the mentee's feedback about how do they feel about being mentored by the person that you've matched them up with. So don't leave this as a one-off thing. So that's one key lesson that we learned. We saw this in one of the workshops that we were organizing as well, where we had a set of speakers that were planned, and then one of the students reached out to us and then said, you probably don't want to have the speaker in a mentorship workshop because of some situations that they described, which I will not get into. And so there are some things that you as an external person wouldn't possibly know about that you get to know only at a later point, by which time perhaps you've already put together the entire program and it's really hard to go back on something that you've already set up. So if you had done the groundwork in advance, you probably wouldn't face the situations that we had to face in this particular context. So just some things that to be, you just have to be aware of as you're setting up this mentorship activity.
Thanks so much for sharing experience and giving us suggestions for the long-term mentorship program. So Steve, can you share also some experience on the MyCS PhD and the info session and how that could help junior researchers?
Let's see. So I've organized a fair number of things. I think the most surprising thing is how if you're convinced and you have some evidence that there's a need and interest, then it's pretty likely people are going to show up. And so it's not all it's really just the little leap of faith that it takes to sort of start something. And I mean, I think you guys have already done that, so that's really good. I am, I guess the things that I'm a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm shameless. I have a small amount of shame. I send a lot of spam when I'm organizing events. So for instance, for this, I run this website called MyCS PhD, and I wanted to get the word out. And so, I used the Mechanical Turk to collect the email addresses of the chairs of every computer science program in the United States. There's about 1,000 of them. And one of our goals was to reach students at institutions that don't usually send people to PhD programs, which means that my normal network was not useful. And so I spam 1,000 CS PhD chairs or CS department chairs when we have one of our workshops, and I get some grumpy emails back from a small number of them, but I think that's okay. And the same thing is true for when we run our workshops. I have a large email list, and we send a lot of email, and so spam is annoying, but we're all good at filtering out our inboxes. So don't be shy about getting the word out. I've also advertised on Facebook. I've advertised on Google. I've done all kinds of things to try to get the word out about different programs. So think creatively about stuff like that. I don't, for you guys, I think it's pretty easy. Like you could probably talk to the general chairs or the steering committees of the various conferences, and they would probably be happy to assist you in spamming potential mentors and mentees to get involved, or at least I hope they would. You could also, I've had my graduate students scrape email addresses off of all the papers presented at a conference, usually at a particular topic, like in the topic of the workshop that's at hand. But those are all, I think, perfectly reasonable tactics. The other thing I would say is, keep it simple. I'm terrible at this, but mycsphd.org it has a YouTube channel, and they were going to have different kinds of videos and like all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out all we really need is like a FAQ and some information sessions. Like that's about as much work as we can handle. And so that's what we do. And, I think the corollary to that is if you can't keep it simple up front, which is hard because you have lots of good ideas, don't feel bad about dropping parts of the program and simplifying it to be manageable, because it's only valuable. I mean, well, that's all. It's most valuable if it lasts a long time, and that means that sustainability is a more important feature than any other particular part of it, right? So having a program that lasts for a long time is more important than having the perfect, coolest program that lasts for a shorter period of time.
Thanks so much, Steve, for the suggestions on our program, sharing experience. So we're gonna switch gear a bit. The program we most see nowadays are targeting primarily, I would say, the US and Canada, these North American regions, plus say Europe or some areas in Southeast Asia where people do mostly architecture. While I think many people haven't done from say other countries, other part of the world, haven't been really exposed to the opportunities in mentorship. So I guess Shabazz, can you share a bit of your experience in overseas mentoring to help spread the research to other places as well?
Yeah, so I think other places, like especially I can give you an example of my home country. Like we are pretty, like, again, just like I mentioned, like they're amazing people, they're great people. It's just that the mentoring that they're getting or the exposure that they're getting is not that great in terms of research or the areas that are bleeding edge, that are considered bleeding edge or hot in the West world or in the more developed world. So basically what I do is, like, now being in this position here as a professor at Purdue, I try to sort of go back to my lineage and like talk to those people and try to sort of interact with the authorities there to set up these kind of like environments where they can interact with people like us. Like you have no idea how strong those students are. It's just that if you don't know the direction, like you will keep on running, but if the road is not in the right way, like you're going in the wrong direction, how much effort or how much energy you're putting in on running on that road will not get you to the destination. So this is where we, like, I think those students need some guidance, and I do have some successes in the past, especially from my alma mater. I think there was one specific student who was interested. They reach out to me. We like sort of have this sort of back and forth about how to approach certain things, how to do certain things. And I think it was a useful experience. But then again, the problem is one person cannot change the system, right? Like so the thing is, like, changing the authorities, changing the systems over there. There are old school thinkings. They have been used to, like, they're now used to those sort of models. So I think it's much easier to make the students change, but the people who are sitting on top, like the ones who have the authority and like who are in the position of power, they are very sort of rigid in their things, because they are not, like, again, it's common, like they don't want to change, like they are settled in their own sort of thing, and if somebody is trying to come and disrupt that thinking, like it's too much work for them. So that's still something that I'm struggling with. I do see like a lot of good people going back and becoming faculty there, so we are teaming up and we are building these sort of associations where we are trying to sort of challenge the status quo, but still there's a long way to go. But as far as like what I do is, like, I have an open channel with all of them. Reach out to me, ping me, and I'm happy to sit down with you and interact with you. One thing that I do want to point out is, like, just like what Alex mentioned, like it takes some time for you to like interact with the mentee properly. Like you cannot just meet with him and quickly say, okay, I understand you, this is your problem, this is my solution, go and apply and you're done. Because some of the times even the mentee doesn't know what he wants to ask, right? Like so it's like it's a gradual discussion. They are themselves most of the time not clear as to what the problem is. So it's like they start a conversation and then it takes over, like it's multiple iterations and multiple interactions over which both the mentor is putting his sort of experience and like, okay, talking to that guy, understanding the gestures, the tones, maybe what he's asking directly is not the right thing, but there's something hidden in the middle, which again, over time you try to assess and guess, and then you hit on the right thing. Oh, okay, that's the problem that this guy is having or this person is having. And this is how we need to address it. So yeah, so there's a challenge, there is a challenge there, but again, I think if you keep an open eye towards these things, you can make good things happen. So again, like just to summarize, like I think internationally, places who are not used to the way we do research here in the West part of the world, I think the challenge is to change the sort of the existing sort of setup that they have over there, like changing the existing authority and like models is the challenging part. Hopefully over time it will change. But as far as what we can do is like, if students are interested, they will basically reach out to you on their own. Like somebody who has the drive will actually break that barrier and reach out and find a way to like get to you. But and the thing, like when they get to me, I make sure that I hold their hand and I talk to them. I don't let them go back. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Shabazz. This is really a good advice to our programs that makes the opportunities more inclusive and covering different areas, diversity of people. So far, our discussion has been focusing on the academia side. I guess from industry side, there are a lot of mentorship opportunities as well. So Lena, could you share a few words on what do you think that industry mentorship can help, especially for people in academia, junior students?
Yeah, so I think there's several ways. One of them is when I was a grad student, it was really unclear to me what it would look like if I went into industry. It was sort of, I saw professors all the time, so I had some idea of what their lives were like, but it wasn't clear to me where I could go in an industry and still publish, what working at big companies is like. Internships help a lot with that, but it's also, I think, helpful to just talk to people who went to industry and hear maybe their unvarnished ideas about what things they really like and what things they don't like, because there's pros and cons to everything. And there are a lot of really nice things about academia and a lot of really nice things about industry. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is that this is maybe less mentorship, but people in industry have sometimes ideas about what they'd like to see in academic research. And so I love meeting with students as part of conferences and things as a chance to maybe influence a little what people are doing research on, or to talk about what people in industry, what problems people are seeing there and might be excited about seeing innovations in.
Quick answer. Thanks for sharing some point of view from the industry perspective. So I guess lastly, I'd like to have one question from not only the mentor side, but also mentee side, which can possibly be representative. So as you are all more senior people in the research, so what kind of mentees do you prefer? For example, what kind of characteristics of mentees you would like to work with? So this is also a given suggestion to the future mentees in our program. So who like to just pick the question?
So I think I can go first. I guess I kind of disagree with the typical notion of, oh, I want to hire the student who's basically, already has a PhD and I'm just going to give them a PhD. That's kind of where I see things trending these days. When I was looking at the applications, I just started looking at applications that are coming in, and clearly some of these people could have already had a PhD. So that's kind of what it's looking like. But I think for me, the biggest thing is none of those things, right? It's not like you need to be, I personally, when I started my PhD experience, I was brand new to CS. I didn't have coding experience beforehand. So there were a lot of things I didn't know. So I kind of feel like all of those things are not something that I would typically at least look for in a mentee. I basically want someone who is motivated and cares about what they're doing and actually wants to make a difference, whatever it is whatever it is that they wish to work on. So that's kind of like the most primary thing that I am looking for in a mentee, and you can assess this in a variety of ways. So as long as a student has picked up one thing that's outside the core curriculum that they are required to take, and they have pushed it far enough to a degree that's actually something that's that they've done and created impact in, that's a really nice assessment of, oh, this person really cares about something and has the ability to kind of see it through and is devoted to this task that they have picked up. So I think those are some of the things that I personally look at when I decide to mentor someone.
Thanks, Akshita. Does anybody else would like to have an add-on on the mentees properties that you like to work with?
So I guess it's a little complicated as a professor, because I want there's two things that I guess I want, or like that are relevant. Like I'm looking for people that can move a research agenda forward, and so they have technical skills and so forth. And then there are other students that I really enjoy mentoring, and those don't always overlap, those two groups. I think the most important thing is this, that you be engaged and open to hearing different ideas about how to approach things. I guess sometimes we refer to students as being advisable or unadvisable, and some students are just not advisable, which doesn't mean they may do fine, but it just means that they're just like going, and you can't steer them at all. And if they're pointed in a good direction, then they'll do great. But if they're pointed in a bad direction, then they're going to go wherever they end up. So I think just being engaged and open to suggestions and open to constructive criticism and critique are the things that make a mentee a pleasant person to mentor. And there's an intangible thing too, like I think I'm coming up on 20 PhDs, 20 conferred PhDs in my group. And there's certainly some of them that I like personally more than others. And that's not a judgment about any particular person. It's just kind of, I guess, chemistry, as we call it in various different contexts. And that's something that's really important to establish. And I think this idea of being able to rematch in your program or being able to switch long-term mentors is a good idea, because you want to have that kind of chemistry so that, talking to someone for an hour a month is pleasant. I have a colleague who says his primary criteria for selecting PhD students is whether or not he wants to talk to them for 30 minutes a week for 6 years, which is, if you think about it, a pretty daunting commitment to make. And so that's especially when looking at someone where it's just a mentorship relationship as opposed to with PhD students, it's also a little bit of an employee relationship, doing stuff for me relationship. You want to pay a lot of attention to that, actually wanting to talk to the person for a long time, and finding a good match there is, I think, probably really important.
Thanks so much, Stephen. So I think it has been a great panel so far. And I guess we should also let the audience raise up questions, probably not only questions for the panelists, but also questions for CASA and CALM program. So feel free to leave message on the chat, or if you like, you can unmute and say it out.
Yeah. So the thing is, while people are doing that, I also wanted to point out one thing. So when I was on the job market, I heard this discussion from this point from Lena, like research, like people who are excited about research, just academia is a thing, and then they can also go to industrial research. That is one aspect of our life. But when we are coming out of PhD, we are also coming into an actual financial world. We are becoming financially stable in some sense. The problem that I found was I had a full knowledge about what kind of packages are out there, what is the salary structure, how the growth happens, and all that thing is quite out there, visible. Like you can actually learn that from like Indeed.com or like LinkedIn and all that. Even now, I know like students, like we have no idea what the academic whole like salary structure looks like. Oh, this is a 9-month thing. Where does the 3-month thing comes from? And all those things. There are still like many people who are doing PhD have no clue about that. They're basically, if they want to go to academia, like it's not a binary solution. Like I got my degree and now let's think about like professorship. No, it builds up over time. So this is a knowledge that they should have beforehand. Like with companies, it's clear. It's not so clear with the academic route, and that was one of the thesis, and that was also causing me some confusion as to, okay, I don't actually know how this other part of my life, which is equally important, is going to pan out. So that, I think mentors, like I think one of the challenges for like new PhDs is like not having that insight of what that thing looks like, and I still don't see any sort of a portal or a place where we can get this thing. And frankly speaking, most of the faculty is still like not open to discussing these things. Like you cannot, I tried, but like many of the time, like the discussion is not as comfortable. Like like it has to be an open thing. So I just wanted to bring that thing up as well.
Thanks so much, Shabazz. I saw a question from the chat. Is the program open to undergrad students? Yes, it definitely is. We are open to people from different backgrounds, undergrad, masters, PhDs, or engineers from industry, pretty much everybody who's interested in computer architecture.
I also want to follow up with that because I'm sorry I didn't include that in the intro slides. That totally should have been there. But because we are opening, we want undergraduate students who are interested in being mentees. That means we're interested in graduate students who are interested in being mentors, because we think it's your early grad students, your early PhD students who are going to have the best perspective on like applying to a PhD program, things like that. So we're also looking for grad students to apply to be mentors as well.
Can I push back on one part of that? I don't think that new PhD students are actually good sources of advice about applying to PhD programs, because they don't actually know anything about how PhD admissions works generally. And it's a remarkably complicated and semi-random process. And I look online and I see these, there's YouTube videos or people like, I got into all the top 5 schools, like watch my YouTube video to understand how to get into. And I watched the video and it's like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? He got in and I'm sure he's talented and everything else, but he doesn't really know why he got in or what that process was like. And the people you really want there are people who are making the decisions, and those are the faculty members. And so on that one point, I think you want faculty members providing mentorship to undergraduates about how to do that. And that's one of the, so my little soapbox about mycsphd.org. That's one of the main things pieces of information we wanted to get to people, is how that application process works and how you should think about it.
Thanks for the
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess you're getting more that institutional, like fill out this form and this form and do them in maybe this order because these programs have an earlier, application date, et cetera. You're getting that from early year PhD students, not the pulling back the curtain, how it happens.
Yep.
It's fair.
Just see a new question from the audience. So how does one shop for a good mentor match as a mentee? Or similarly, any advice for CALM committee for matchmaking? So who'd like to share a few points on this?
I'll say that one thing that can be pretty helpful is allowing people to, at least for some of their mentors or mentees, opt into matching by like sort of what affinity groups they're in. So at this point, I mostly will only mentor people who are women or non-binary, or who are, I'm openly gay, and if there are mentees who would like to know what things are like at work or when I was in grad school, I prefer to preserve my time for people in these groups. And I suspect this is true for a lot of people who are in underrepresented groups, that they prefer to preserve some of their time, especially for people who maybe are having some of the same experiences that they have. And so having that as an option is good, but on the other hand, you also don't want to say, you can only have, if you are a woman, you can only have a mentor who is a woman and none of the other mentors can be for you. I think that's also pretty bad.
Thanks so much. Is any add-on points from other panelists? So I guess we also almost running out of time. And I'd like to also mention that this session is being recorded. As you can see, the blinking sign on the upper left corner. So with your permission, we'd like to have this open for other people, especially those from different time zones, also to have an idea of how the program is looking like and get your suggestions. So if there's no objection, I would just make it open on CASA's website. Okay, perfect. So thanks so much you all for attending this, and I guess this concludes our panel session very well. And hopefully we will see some of the audience being mentees and the panelists and other attendees being mentors in the future. Okay, see you.